Hi, welcome. Glad everyone is here. Thank you so much for being here in person. And due to the video, I'm going to stay behind this to speak into the microphone just so the video can hear. Otherwise, I would much prefer to be out there among you. But appreciate you coming. I today want to share some insights from a recent book I read. And talk to you a little bit about what's going on in the junior school. And please stop, ask questions anytime. I mean, I really would love for this to be a conversation. So I think there's some interesting information that is worthy of discussion in one of the books that I want to bring up today. And you'll also have opportunity to hear directly from this author soon, too. I'm excited to tell you about that. So to begin, over the break, Mr. Sawyer, who's the dean of the high school, he and I both read this book of Boys and Men by Richard Reeves. It has been heavily promoted by the IBSC, which is the International Boys School Coalition, which MBA is involved with. Mr. Joy has been very involved with that organization. And we read this and we presented on this book to faculty during our faculty in-service at the beginning of January. So some of the insights I think they're very important to those of us who have sons, have males in our lives. So I wanted to pass along some of the key takeaways to you and then make you aware that Mr. Reeves is going to be here at MBA later this month to be speaking in our theater. And so I think that'll be a wonderful event and encourage you to come. So the main premise of his book, and I have a quote here, there are a growing number of boys and men who are struggling in school, at work, and in the family. And Reeves points to several key factors that, really the data that he thinks supports this. I'm honing in today on the pieces that really relate mostly to boys. There's a lot of interesting information in it about men as well. But with the boys, his main point is that boys' brain development is so much different than girls. And I think I talked about this at one of our first meetings. We were talking about adolescent brain development. But boys' prefrontal cortex develops, generally speaking, 1 to 2 years behind girls. And so someone in a classroom with boys and girls can typically see that playing out. But what has occurred over time is that it's led to a gender gap. And it's led to a gender gap in education. So in K through 12 schooling, you see this gap play out over time, and I'll go into a little bit more detail in a minute. But Reeves recommends that we, quote unquote, redshirt the boys, which is to start them in school a year behind. Now, I think Nashville is on the front end of this because we already do that, I think, which is great. Case in point, we lived out in the Smyrna area when we first moved here. We started our son in kindergarten when he had just turned 5. I mean, he was brand new. In first grade, when we moved him to a school up in Nashville, they immediately looked at him and they were like, oh, he's really young. And I mean, he was, compared to the people he was shadowing with, he was so young. So we repeated him in first grade. So I think you see most boys are in this area starting kindergarten around age 6, which I think in terms of their long-term development is very good for them. A piece of Reeves' book that I think is really important to point out is that for him, this is not about elevating boys and men above girls and women. It is more about just having them have just as many opportunities, just as much energy put into their development, their opportunities than girls. So he says it's not a zero-sum game. It's not either we're good for boys or we're good for girls. It's we can do what's best for both. And that is what he encourages. Here's some really interesting data. So if you kind of start at one ending point, which is a number of bachelor's degrees awarded, in 1972, men were 15 percentage points higher than women in terms of bachelor's degrees awarded. That's the same year Title IX was passed. Fast forward to 2021, women are now 15 percentage points higher than men. That is a 30-point swing in those years. Title IX has worked. A lot of the programs obviously are providing opportunities for young women. But now his argument is that men are being left in the wake. And these men and boys need their own programs. They need their own focus and support to begin to catch back up. So working backward from there, the gender gap in K through 12 school achievement results from the different speeds at which boys and girls learn. Girls are 14 percentage points more likely to be school ready than boys by age 5. So when researchers look at school readiness, they compare genders, they compare socioeconomic status, they compare races. The gap between boys and girls is the greatest among any of that comparison. And so that is the biggest. And Reeves says the reason we want to redshirt the boys is not because of where they're going to be at age 5, but it's more for where they're going to be at age 15. It's the most important. So he says this gap in development of skills and traits, this is between boys and girls, that is the development of those traits that's most important for academic success is widest at precisely the time when students need to be worrying about their GPA and staying out of trouble, approximately 15 years old. So as he has tracked this gap between what students are capable of doing, what they've developed, the skills they have, he says that gap gets widest around 15, which is right when most boys are entering high school, when their GPA begins to count, et cetera. So he's just trying to prove the point that schools need to pay attention to this and develop things a little bit more differently to recognize where boys are at particular ages. The second thing he points to is what he calls an aspiration gap. This is directly from the book. He says, "It seems clear to me that motivation and aspiration, almost impossible to capture quantitatively, are a big part of the story here. Young women are seizing opportunities with much greater zeal than young men. It is not that men have fewer opportunities, it is that they are not taking them. The problem seems to be a decline in agency, aspiration, and motivation." Which is interesting. And I will tell you, for me, I've been at MBA 6 months. I immediately started thinking of the opportunities and programs that are available here that speak directly into where we see these declines in boys in general. So for instance, Wilson Grant programs and opportunities to get out and travel. So many service opportunities, service summer trips, just the number of clubs on campus or local service opportunities. You know, there's so many opportunities for boys to get involved, and I think to show the agency of, like, I can be an agent of change. Reasons to help, I think, people around them, trying to motivate them and show them what that means. So I think there are a lot of opportunities here, but it's also important for you to know that these are conversations that, you know, we're talking about among our faculty and saying, you know, what are you seeing in the classroom? Are you seeing evidence of this in the classroom? And then, of course, I think what leads after that are coming up with some solutions and some concrete steps we can take to try to weigh into it. So let me stop there and see just if you have any comments on what you've heard so far, if you see any of this playing out. I can tell you that Mr. Julia's word at the beginning of the year was agency, and he's been talking so often this year about agency and helping the boys, and this is trying to obviously permeate school culture, but to recognize that they do have those opportunities to make change, that they do have the power to do that. So that's been, you know, it's been a wonderful thing to see here. No comments? Okay. So I'm just thinking concrete things. So given these trends, right, these are trends in education, what can we encourage them to do? I think as a parent, we can encourage our sons to problem solve on their own. It is so natural, and I'm like the chief among us who will jump in and go, I have a solution. And they're like, Mom, I don't need a solution. It's so easy because we just want to help them figure it out. But I think what they need us to do is keep our mouths closed and just ask them the question, you know, what do you think is the best way to handle it? And let them start to problem solve out loud. And in that, I'm sure will be opportunity for us to step in and maybe provide some guideposts along the way. But that is, I think, an opportunity to help them build the agency that we know they have and they need to recognize that they have in themselves. Also, as time allows in everyone's busy life, is embrace opportunities for new experiences. Just to try something different, get outside their comfort zone a little bit. Those build wonderful skills. I think empathy being among them is just getting out and being around other people and just having some new experiences. So a little plug for his visit. He will be at MBA on Monday, February 15th at 5 p.m. He will be in the new theater. Well, let me double check if I've put this up here incorrectly. Monday is the 13th. Yep. So we are expecting a very large crowd for this. We have people that I've heard coming in from all over the country to hear this man speak. So I do, if you're interested, encourage you, as soon as you see information out about tickets, to go ahead and get on that pretty quickly. I think the connection is through the IBSC. And so I think the IBSC has asked if MBA would host this. Yep. Interesting question. In the book itself, he does not comment in the way that we might hope he would. And so we brought that up. But what I've learned, I think, from Mr. Julia, who's been in contact with the IBSC, is they have engaged Mr. Reeves. He has learned more about single-sex education, and I think his viewpoint has evolved. And so I do think that he may comment some on that. But obviously, I think for me, just being in a boys' school, having been in education for a while, when you see the data and you see the difference, you're like, it makes sense. Like, it just makes sense to have a single-gender classroom, because then, we can meet them right where they are. I think it also, for me, sometimes I'll talk to parents who get very frustrated with their son, and they have an older sister, and that's a tough place to be, is a boy who's come after a girl, because the girls do develop so much more quickly, and you see them organized, and they're on things, and they have plans, and they're thinking about the future, and then the next one comes along, and you're like, what happened? But they're just being who they are. And one of the points that I love that Reeves makes is that boys are going to develop all of this. They just need time. They just need time. And he even comments on they will grow into, I'm paraphrasing, not just wonderful young men, but gentlemen. But they just need more time. And so they need our patience, is what they need. Not that I recall, no. Mm-mm. And he goes into detail about the workforce today. He talks about the HEAL professions, with their health, education, administration, and literacy, and how there's been such a great push for girls getting into STEM. And then that's great. They are getting into STEM, and we're seeing so much growth of women in STEM fields. But he argues that we need to see comparable growth of men in these other fields. And some of the HEAL fields are ones where, it might benefit you to have a more developed EQ. And so I think those, we were talking yesterday about, we don't want to call them soft skills, because that makes them sound like they're weak skills. They're not. They're very important skills, but skills just such as empathy and just being able to work well with people. And that's part of what, we want to be able to do here, is develop those skills in boys, and character, et cetera, and to help them move into and just to open their eyes to some of those other professions. So there have been wage gaps for years. The wage gap has closed significantly between men and women. It still exists, but now with so many jobs being automated. I think a lot of those hands-on jobs that were primarily for men, some of those are disappearing. And so we have a group of people who are left now without jobs to do. And so it's just, it's a complex situation. He's much more articulate, obviously, and researched about it. So I encourage you to come listen. Yes, ma'am. Right. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. I think that points to our awareness, because we obviously can't, we won't be creating a different class depending on age. We want them all together, but I think as teachers and administrators are aware of, what, he's really young. And that already is woven into our conversations for now, just knowing. But, I think for me, just looking over the junior school and looking at the sixth graders who are coming into seventh grade and recognizing what boys this age struggle with, it's executive functioning. So much of what we see, with some executive functioning coaching can be helped. But, I'm looking at ways we can build that into what we do so when they arrive, we are helping them. And you know what? They do. Some need more help than others, and that's fine. But I think we can be there to provide that. Great question. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Just a little snippet from around junior school. You all may have heard of the course forms that your sons are talking about with registration. And they're currently in process of having that conversation with advisors. Current seventh graders don't have to do much. They have a prescribed curriculum. Eighth graders do have some choices to make, but just a reminder that those forms are due to their advisors on Monday, and they do require a parent's signature. So I'm telling you that if you haven't been asked for your signature, might be just good to say, hey, anything you need me to sign? Yes. You don't start over in ninth grade. You do, if you are in honors in eighth grade. And so I think what they typically are looking for is a 92 average to maintain. That doesn't mean if you're below that, you won't get into honors, but that's what they're looking for to move you into honors at the next level. If you aren't in honors in eighth grade, that does not mean that you cannot move into honors the following year. And you know what? I'm wrong. I think the threshold is lower if you're already in honors. I think it's an 88. And then if you are not in honors, you need to have a higher, like mid-90s type average to be considered for honors the next year. Those are data points they look at that aren't just, you're in, you're out based on that, but just kind of a general reference. Correct, for that subject, yes. And so, moving into honors next year absolutely sets you up to move into honors the following year, assuming you're managing it fairly well. I know some people have asked, if we're not in honors next year, does that mean we can't ever get into honors? That is not the case. So you do have the opportunity to move. Yep. Ms. Rouse, do you feel like I got that right? Okay. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. To my recollection from the beginning of the year, I believe it's a couple of weeks at least. That, again, that is not a hard cutoff. I think there are always situations, ultimately we want a student to be in the best place to succeed. But they do have some amount of time. I would encourage, if you have a specific subject question, you can let me know what that is and I can follow up with the lead in that area. You're welcome. Another question? That's correct. Yep, just based on your class. Yes, ma'am. There's not another round of conferences this year. No. No, but you are always welcome to reach out to your son's advisor and schedule a time to meet. They are always open to that. They don't, for instance, schedule a one-on-one with each advisee, but they are always in conversation, I would say, with all advisees, especially, if the advisee is hitting a bump in the road. The advisor are keeping a close eye on their grades, close eye on their overall well-being. So they will engage an advisee one-on-one, and I'm sure each of them do often. But in terms of an actual, like, on this date, we are scheduling this time to meet, we do not have that in place. Yes. No, I would, in your shoes, I would reach out and say, like, I have some concerns, would you be able to talk to my son about A, B, and C? I'm trying, but he's not listening. Right. You're welcome. Anything else? All right, one other piece that I wanted to show you is, I don't have a picture of this, but this is a book I'm currently reading. It's called Disconnected. The author is Thomas Kersting. And if you know Mr. Russell, he was up in Boston at a conference with Mr. Jenkins, who's two of our junior school English teachers. It was before the break. And they heard this speaker, Thomas Kersting, and he's done a lot of research on adolescent brain development and how it's impacted by use of social media in particular. And so there's some incredible takeaways in this book. And once I finish it, I want to try to condense it, and I will kind of bring you some of my key takeaways at our next Parent Connection meeting. But it's fascinating. And obviously, I think the generation that grew up with a phone in their hand and that is probably more connected to what's going on their phone in general is getting old enough that I think we have a good number of years of research to be able to take a clear look at what the impact has been. So there was a recent study published by University of North Carolina, and they talked about the impact of adolescent brain development and specifically linked to social media. And their takeaway was that it makes adolescents more sensitive to feedback from their peers. And so that's directly connected to how often they're checking social media. And I think, if I'm reading into this correctly, it's looking at things that are posted, seeing the comments are made, is actually impacting their brain, so they are more sensitive when a comment is made directly to them by a peer in real time. So that was all that the study said. I was a little disappointed. I was hoping for a lot more, but it was interesting. The subtitle of this book is How to Protect Your Kids from the Harmful Effects of Device Dependency. And so this is one of the books that I'm like, do I really want to read that and read everything that I've done wrong over the past few years? But I'm trying to have a growth mindset the same way I encourage students to have one too. So any other questions? Any other topics that you'd love to hear more about? Absolutely. Right. Yes. Yes, he is welcome. Welcome to attend. Some are, we've had a couple that have been junior school specific, but I think anyone's welcome at the opportunities. And on the weekly email that you receive from the school, it has a number of links across the bottom. And I just encourage you to go ahead and open those links. There's a lot of information down there. So everything, Laura and I try to put all of the junior school related items on our page, but that does not include athletics. We won't be pulling from service pages and putting there. So that's why I think it's important to go ahead and look at each of the links under there and see what you can find. This is our service webpage. You can see all the partners and projects we have. And so it might be, a neat opportunity, I think, for a group of boys if, they want to get some friends together and say, hey, let's go do this. There's strength in numbers for them, for sure. But I think it might be good for us to try to rally a group of junior school students and just have us lead and organize that so they feel like they have a place to go and don't have to do that on their own. Yes.
I'm just wondering, I love the opportunity to get together with other parents and discuss that thing, that thing. Is that something that's ongoing or is this discussion one-off?
I'm gonna ask Miss Dayani because that's organized by the Mothers Club.
It does it one-off. Parents only does it once a year, that we meet together as a mother's club. But the book study is actually once a year. But we try, let's try to do multiple things throughout the year. For last summer, we tried to organize social events for moms. Into the second grade. There's a coffee coming up, if you got that email. There's also a great opportunity in February where we have the Wellness Wednesday events. And that's really just self-care, which is fine. It is a great way to come in with moms and literally moms come together to play, and it is super happy. And it lasts about an hour, but it's a great place to do that. And then later in the spring, we're doing a multi-school event, which is about speak on anxiety. That's going to be less like community building, but it's a good subject to learn about. But that's another discipline. But I think those are most of the places where you're going to have an opportunity to meet. I think it's the seventh grade one last probably was super cool to meet people that are happy. And I feel like as I'm reading this, listening to how the adult, so specifically around the parent education stuff. Oh, I'm very convicted by that book. And Carolyn Scholl, I was thinking about Miss Scholl, but she's doing an outpatient high school. And so it will be a really interactive discussion. It will not be her presenting the book. It will be a discussion
So more interest in just follow-up discussions on the books would be great. Okay, that's great. Thank you. The disconnected? Well, you know what? Let's just schedule it right now because why not? So how about after our next parent connection meeting, at the end of that meeting, if you would like to stay, and we'll just have a breakout book discussion and we'll do it right afterward. And so if you will get hungry, then bring your lunch. You can have a brown bag lunch. If we have a random warm day, then we'll sit outside. Yes. It's Disconnected, and the author's Thomas Kirsting. We do. Let me pull it up. February 23rd. Yep. Same time, same place. And the book discussion next week will be in here at noon on Wednesday. Any other questions? Yeah. Yes. Those are for boys. Yeah, those are just for boys. In fact, baseball was today. If your son happened to miss it, it's not a problem. Mr. Martin is the contact. He can reach out to him for junior school baseball. And then in February are the lacrosse meetings. So we have a little more time before those happen. Tomorrow night, if you haven't heard, for 7th graders, there's a big brother, little brother event leading into the basketball game. So there's a basketball game at 7:30, but starting at 7, the deans are ordering loads of pizza for the 7th and 12th graders to come and enjoy before the game. So just hoping to get a good group out there for that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention to you is we have our class meetings actually in 2 weeks. And I was talking to Ms. Scholler today, and she just had the wonderful idea, and I wanted to share with you too, of, as we're always looking for conversations we can have about character with the boys. And I think when those organic conversations arise to something that they can really connect with, I think, they have more meaning to them than ways we might otherwise engage it. So she was recommending, that we just look for ways. An example she had was the Buffalo Bills football coach. She said there was just an article in the Wall Street Journal about him and the way that he engaged his team and the player, Damar Hamlin, who had cardiac arrest in the middle of the game. And just, pointing out that, this is a National Football League coach, obviously highly respected in athletic circles and in football circles, but the empathy that he demonstrated toward his player and the way that he engaged his team and cared for them and walking through that process, I think it's just a wonderful example of the kind of leadership that we hope to cultivate, in our students. And so as parents, if you see those stories pop up, it's just a wonderful opportunity to have a conversation about it. And it's something that is naturally, I think, fairly interesting to many of the boys, but we'll be looking for more of those types of people that we can put in front of them that they're naturally interested in, but who also reflect really strong character and good decision making, because we know they have many influences today that are not that way. That we obviously can't protect them from everything, and we don't want to, because that's not going to prepare them for life. But we can point them to, I think, really good examples of people that we want them to emulate. So I just wanted to finish with that. I will stay up here. If you have any follow-up questions or anything else you want to talk about, please, would love to see you. And thank you again for coming, and hope to see you next month and hope you have time to read the book, or even if you don't, feel free to come to the discussion anyways and just listen. So thank you.